where we can stand behind our knowledge. Our knowledge, we know what we know. You know, people can question us and we can change our knowledge, but we know what we're doing. We're aware of the knowledge base on which we work. There is no harm in a school saying, these are things we'd like to do next. We know we're not doing them now, totally, but we'd like to do them next. There's nothing wrong with that. It's fine to be able to say, these are the practices, we know good practices, and we're going to put in place. And this is evidence of our motivation. If a school shows that it really wants to learn more about literacy, the school leadership team is resourcing the teachers time for reflection, time for PD, time to try things out, really fostering dialogue. Who could doubt the motivation of that school? And I am not a pretty clever person, I'm a pretty grassroots person, and I tend to look for things on the ground. I was brought up on a dairy farm, and I look for real things. And the real things would be when people do actions that seem consistent, you know, in terms of where we're wanting to go. So we can talk about individual teacher knowledge, but we can also talk about school knowledge. And this is, I think, what we should be aiming towards. And I would hope that as many of you as possible get a bonus for improving the quality of teaching in your schools. And I'm saying this as like something to think, as a goal to move towards. Okay, tools to examine each aspect of the professional knowledge at each level. So how would you assess your school's pedagogic capital at present? And what's the evidence for what you're saying? How well do staff put their pedagogic knowledge into practice? And what are indicators of that? And as we've said, one of the indicators is how prepared the staff are to talk about students learning in terms of the literacy knowledge they need to acquire. To what extent has the literacy capital of your school changed recently after involvement in PD? And really, I mean, what Wayne said was fantastic. I haven't spoken to Wayne since I've been back, and I didn't know that quite a few of the schools had really improved. That he is really, you know, he's really pleased, obviously, with the progress that some of the schools have made. So there is evidence that the pedagogic capital in some of the schools has really improved, has really gone up. And I think that's really good. Now, obviously, as he said, and as Lena said, we're not going to stop there. But it's great that we've seen evidence of it happening. And what I was on about here was, what would we look for to gather data about each aspect of the knowledge at each level? I would like to come back to this a bit later this afternoon as a group activity, where I get you, because once you're aware of what to look for, once you've got tools for seeing these things, you can actually improve them better. Like we've said all the way along, once you know what to look for, you're more able to get it. If you don't know what it looks for, it's going to be harder. In terms of how we go about changing teacher knowledge, if you were going to assess, let's say you were going to assess what your colleagues know about literacy knowledge, where would you go to look for ideas on what literacy knowledge is? One place you could look is in the NAPLAN. What's shown in the NAPLAN tests in terms of literacy knowledge. A second is in the we saw last time in the actions that we're pushing in the high reliability strategies. A third take on what's literacy knowledge They're the ones that are in the high reliability strategies. The third, obviously, is what's in VELS and so on. What we're seeing as literacy knowledge, as when children are provided with books or when they're provided with text, that they can actually do these sort of things to build the idea that the text is on about in their minds and then feed it back into their long-term memory. We've got the VELS as a way of describing what student knowledge looks like. So when we ask that first question, what does literacy knowledge look like? And you engage your colleagues in that discussion. It may be that you need to refer them back to some of those sources so that they can see what literacy knowledge looks like. Okay, if when you're looking at at the knowledge your colleagues have about actually doing the teaching options, what are some of the things you're going to be looking for? Well, a lot of these we actually covered earlier today when you went through and did the lessons, and we've put together that evaluation list. When you're doing the teaching options, one of the things that you would be doing or your colleague would be doing would be deciding how and when to teach each of the literacy strategies in the content that you're wanting to teach. So it should be possible for you to have a dialogue about what it would look like in the teaching context. Secondly, the person would be planning how they're going to actually implement or how they're going to scaffold the students' learning and thinking. The dialogue, the gestures, how they'll do it. They should be able to model the particular literacy teaching procedure. So when the children are learning the strategy, and we said, we've got it on the transparency, being able to model the strategy for the students is important. You need to know what the students will be doing, we've already talked about. You need to know the feedback you're going to be giving. So all that I'm trying to do here is to look at what each aspect of teacher knowledge would look like for you in order to go about targeting this in your professional development for those teachers. And one strategy you might have, and this is a strategy that, for example, Footscray City Secondary College are using. They're recording